Welcome to Top of Mind, Florida. This is Brian Crowley, and I'm with my co-host, Michael. Oh, Michael's still gone. He's on vacation in Alaska, while I'm sitting here in the sweltering heat of Florida. I think we're having record heat these days. You merely step outside for 30 seconds and you leave a puddle at your feet. So anyway, Michael's enjoying the very cold weather of Alaska, and my guest is the Honorable former State Attorney, MSNBC superstar on Morning Joe and other things, David Aronberg. Welcome, Dave.
Brian, great to be with you, and I miss Michael, but, the salmon probably miss him more.
So, you grew up in Miami.
Yeah.
Has Miami changed much?
What do you think? I went to public schools down there, North Miami Senior High School, and then went away for college and law school, but I loved it down there at the time, but the place has changed dramatically. It was... Compared to where it is now, it was a sleepy place. Now it's like the worldwide center for commerce, or South America. It's a gateway to the Americas. It is a remarkable place, still as showy as ever. I mean, you see everyone driving around their Bentleys and Lambos, purple Lamborghinis, but it's never a dull place.
The late Governor Bob Graham, who grew up in Miami, used to say Miami. Mm-hmm. So which is it, Dave? Miami or Miami?
Whenever I would be around what we called the crackers back then, this is the old school Floridians, they'd call it Miami. I had teachers in elementary school that call it that, but not too many people phrase it that way anymore.
Do you miss Miami?
Well, I still am loyal to the Miami teams as far as the Dolphins and the Hurricanes and the Panthers now. I've ratcheted up the list of my favorite teams. That's what happens when you win 2 Stanley Cups in a row. And, now, the Miami Heat, of course, and the Marlins even are making a go out of it. So, it's good to be actually underrated stories to be a Miami sports fan these days is better than the doldrums of the past couple of decades.
As a kid who grew up in Florida and you grew up in Florida, I never did understand our attraction to ice hockey.
Well, you have a lot of transplants, and yes, you know what it is? It's an attraction to winners. The Panthers were out of sight, out of mind for a couple decades, and then they started winning again. Same thing with the Marlins. If they start winning again, people will come to the games. And the Miami Heat have been the only winner in the last couple decades down here, really consistently. Now it's the Dolphins to try to do their end of the bargain, but I don't know. They're pretty hopeless, unfortunately.
Now, you retired as a state attorney this past January. So reflect on your experience as state attorney. Was it a great event? Was it more trying than you expected? What did you learn about the office that you didn't know when you took it?
One thing that I did not realize when taking the office of state attorney, which just for your viewers and listeners, it's the same thing as the DA. It's the district attorney. We just call it state attorney in Florida. We have to be different. I think the biggest surprise to me, first off, I was so impressed with the staff. You have people there who could be making a lot more money in the private sector, and they're excellent. And now that I'm back in the private sector, I miss them. And government workers get a bad rap, but these guys are really excellent. Now, as far as in the job, I think most people think that when the danger of a prosecutor is you put away some criminals and they're going to come out and get you. No, actually, the criminals, the defendants, they know how the game is played. It's more dangerous to be a witness, more dangerous to be a defense lawyer, quite frankly. They're the ones who get blamed when things go wrong. I was surprised by the vitriol you get from potential victims whose cases you don't file, or victims who don't like the outcome of a case. Perhaps they wanted the death penalty and you don't seek it, or they wanted charges filed and you say, no, it's self-defense, we're not going to seek it. That was a bit of a surprise, because ultimately, as a prosecutor, you don't represent victims in court. You're not their lawyer. You're the people's lawyer. That's why it's the state versus Johnson, and not representing the victim per se. But you also have the dual responsibility of standing up for victims. So at one point, you're not the victim's lawyer, but you have to represent them in a way by standing up for them. So it's an unusual hybrid that sometimes makes no one happy.
So what do you think of juries?
The only thing that is predictable about juries is that they are notoriously unpredictable. I mean, I think towards juries the same way that Winston Churchill felt towards democracy, and that is, it's the worst system in the world except for all the other systems. There's still no better way of deciding a case, warts and all. And I have disagreed with juries. I disagreed with the jury in the Diddy case most recently. I disagreed strongly with the jury in the Karen Reed case. My gosh, there's George Zimmerman, there's Casey Anthony, O.J. Simpson. There are a lot of juries who get it wrong, but at the same time, there are a lot of juries who get it right. Most of the time, they get it right. And even when they get it wrong, our system, by the way, Brian, one thing is that it is based on that we would rather have 100 guilty people go free than to convict one innocent person.
So one of the hottest cases being talked about right now, which you're familiar with, Jeffrey Epstein. And, there's this demand. Many people may not know this, but... and I always have a tough time pronouncing her first name, Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell. I told you I had a tough time pronouncing her name. She's actually in a federal prison in Tallahassee. And, Jeffrey Epstein was in Palm Beach County, Florida. Of course, anything important in the world seems to happen in Florida these days. What do you think about what's happening with that case? It's become very, very political. And there's the secret files that the White House and the Justice Department is holding on to, supposedly. And if I understand correctly, you think a lot of that is nonsense.
Well, you know the story of Dr. Frankenstein, right? Frankenstein. So you have this doctor who created this monster, and that's what the Trump administration and their supporters did. The MAGA base, they have fed this monster, this conspiracy theory that there is somehow a client list, and on top of the client list is supposedly Bill Clinton and Bill Gates and every other prominent Democrat, and they led this cabal of child molesters. No, that's false. That's a conspiracy theory. But the alligator is always hungry, and these the MAGA folks, the MAGA leaders have fed this alligator. They have fed this monster, and now the monster, the alligator, is going to rip their face off, because unless you show them what they've been promised, which is the client list, they're not going to accept it, and they're going to revolt, and they have been revolting. And no matter how much Trump tries to distract people by talking about Obama's treason or the Washington Redskins or Coca-Cola's new formula of pure sugar, it's not going to change people's minds on this one. This is a foundational mistruth that has animated the MAGA base, just like that Obama was supposedly born in Kenya, false. Just like the 2020 election was stolen, false. This is an animating characteristic of the MAGA base, that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered behind bars, and there's a client list, and those clients are Democrats. But none of that is true. Epstein killed himself. It is a suicide. Pam Bondi is right about that. And there is no client list. She's also right about that. Where they are wrong is that they perpetuated, namely Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and others, perpetuated this myth that there's this client list and that there's this grand conspiracy. No. The only thing, though, that does seem to be true is that there are third parties out there who have committed these horrific crimes and have not been charged with it. And that's not a client list. That's in the Epstein files. And yet the Epstein files are not being released by the Department of Justice for a bunch of reasons, and we can get to that.
Well, Pam Bondi, maybe she misspoke, but she kind of alluded to the idea that she had a client list sitting on her desk. Why would she say something like that?
Because she misspoke. You answered your question in your question. So Pam Bondi was on Fox News, and they asked her, they said, so is there a client list? And she said, I've got it sitting there on my desk.
Right.
And then afterwards, she clarified she was referring to the Epstein files, not a client list. Now, she should have been more artful with her words. She should have, but what happens is you're on Fox News. You're trying to please the audience. You're going along with it. You're getting caught up in the moment, and you say things that you can later regret. But she has clarified that there is no client list. In fact, the people closest to this, whether it's Julie Brown, the reporter from the Miami Herald who broke the story the second time around, or Alan Dershowitz, Epstein's former lawyer, they all say there is no client list. In fact, if there was a smoking gun client list, don't you think that Ghislaine Maxwell would have given it up to save herself? Instead, she's now sitting in prison for 20 years. If there was a client list that can be a get-out-of-jail-free card, don't you think she would have given it up? So there is no client list, but there is an Epstein file that the administration possesses that does contain damaging evidence. And the reason why they haven't produced it, twofold. First, it has been Department of Justice policy for years and years that you don't reveal the names of uncharged individuals, unindicted co-conspirators, and these individuals are unindicted co-conspirators. Secondly, and actually there's three reasons. Secondly, there are names of victims, and you can't reveal them, that there's privacy rules. And there are some court orders that do protect some of the alleged Johns, apparently. There apparently these court orders. So you have to go through all those things. Not impossible. But here's the third reason, and this is the political side of it. Trump's name is in the Epstein files. I mean, it is. We saw it with that birthday letter. He's there. Now, it doesn't mean that he participated in any illegal activity, but he doesn't want to be around that smoke. Okay? And I think it's one of the reasons why they're not releasing the files.
You said last November on MSNBC about Pam Bondi, her love for Donald Trump is a real love. She is a true believer. She is also someone who believes in the rule of law. Do you still think that?
Well, let's go to the first part. I do believe that, yes, he is very loyal to Trump. And it is a true love. It's not like the Lindsey Graham type of love that's transactional. You know, she's not crossing her fingers and muttering under her breath. Now, as far as believing in the rule of law, yes, she's a 20-year prosecutor. She knows that if she steps over the line and prosecutes Trump's enemies for purely political reasons, she's going to get bit, that she's going to get in trouble for it. That's different than Matt Gaetz, who was his original pick for Attorney General. He was there to blow the House up. He was there to go after Trump's enemies, to walk Liz Cheney out in handcuffs. But whether these individuals got a pardon or not, you notice that Pam Bondi has not crossed that line and has not prosecuted Trump's enemies for political purposes. And if that day comes, have me back and I'll eat some crow. She has done things I disagree with, and I knew that I would disagree with her. In fact, I've been friends with her, but I ran against her, remember, in 2010. I mean, because we have different ideologies, and we disagree a bunch on policy and politics. I will continue to disagree with her on a number of things, but as far as will she cross the line and just do things that are blatantly illegal, no, I don't think she's done that yet. I still don't think she'll do that.
Well, does she have any role in how ICE and other organizations are handling immigrants?
Well, that's Christine Noem and the Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
But as far as the issue of Abrego Garcia, remember the individual who was sent to El Salvador, even though there's a court order in place, I do think that the DOJ was playing games with words, saying, well, we abided by the judge's verbal order or the written order, but not the verbal order, and we are prepared to facilitate his return by sending a plane, but we're not going to talk to El Salvador's government because it's up to them. They were playing games with that. Now, were they blatantly illegal and totally disregarding a court order? No, had they'd be held in contempt. They have exploited the nuances in the court order. For example, the Supreme Court said that it's facilitate Abrego Garcia's release. They actually softened the words of the lower court judge, who made it a lot tougher, who said, no, you got to go out and get him. But the Supreme Court, on purpose, because they wanted a 9-0 ruling, said, no, we just want you to facilitate. And then Trump administration said, okay, facilitate means we'll send a plane and sit back and be passive. I mean, that's where part of the problem is that the Supreme Court has allowed the Trump administration to choose your own adventure. And I think that the Supreme Court is starting to tire of it. You can see by some of the more recent rulings. And I do think that the fact that Abrego Garcia was brought back to the United States shows that they are following the law, even though a lot of us may disagree with how they're doing it.
How would you describe the condition of the judiciary? Has it been overly politicized? Is part of it because every time anybody talks about a judge, we now always refer to it as an Obama-appointed judge, a Trump-appointed judge, a Bush-appointed judge, which we never used to do. We used to maybe at say conservative judge, liberal judge, moderate judge, but in recent years we've now tagged them with whoever appointed them, and sort of and suggesting that if that judge has been appointed by Trump or been appointed by Obama, that's how the decisions are being made. What condition is our judiciary in?
Well, Chief Justice Roberts wants us to buy into the court as an apolitical institution. But the way that the court has been acting, whether it's giving Donald Trump unprecedented powers, almost complete immunity, almost, not totally, that has undermined faith in the court. And it does seem that the justices appointed by Trump, with the exception of Amy Coney Barrett, do seem to roll over for him, at least on some of the most important cases. I do not think it's fair to just paint with a broad brush saying that if you're appointed by Trump, you're going to automatically support him. That's why Trump has revolted against the Federalist Society and now hates Leonard Leo, the head of the Federalist Society, because he thought those judges would be loyal to him. In fact, they were strict constructionalists, they were conservatives, but they were not Trump loyalists, at least not most of them, or nearly all of them. So now Trump is doing something different. He wants to appoint loyalists, and he's got one in Emile Beauvais, who's up for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and looks like he'll get on that bench. So does that undermine faith in the judiciary when a president is appointing a loyalist, not because of ideology, not because of qualifications, but because he knows he'll be loyal to him? Yes, that's a problem. But the judges, the judicial branch, has been the only branch of government of the two remaining branches that has stood up and provided guardrails against an executive branch that is taking away power from the other branches. For example, the legislative branch has decided to self-emasculate for the first time in history. They have given up their power to the executive branch. The judiciary has not done that. They are still a guardrail, even though sometimes they seem to get it wrong.
And how would you describe the Florida judiciary? You know, Governor Ron DeSantis always has that axe hovering over appointees or elected officials that he's not shy about removing from office if they cross him in any way. What impact are we having on the Florida judiciary? Because in many ways, Ron DeSantis is as determined, shall we say, to get his way as Donald Trump is to get his way. So what's happening in Florida?
Well, the Supreme Court, which used to be progressive before DeSantis got there, he has now appointed, I believe, 5 out of the 7 justices. It's a 6-1 conservative majority. Now, occasionally they'll rule against him on the abortion amendment and marijuana amendments. They ruled to put him on the ballot. It's 4-3 on the abortion amendment, so by the narrowest of margins. But it is a conservative bench, and throughout the state of Florida, you see many appointments from DeSantis who have ruled the way he wanted them to rule. For example, when he suspended my counterpart in Tampa, Andrew Warren went to the federal judiciary, went to the federal courts instead of state courts, thinking he would not get a fair shake in the state courts. And the federal courts pretty much demurred and said, well, you really need to go to state court. And the state court then heard it, and the state court, the Supreme Court, said, too late, sucker. You should have come to us from the beginning. And then the state attorney in Orlando, Monique Royal, who was suspended by the governor, went this time to the state courts because she's supposed to go to the state courts, and said, the governor can't just suspend me because he disagrees with my politics. And the state courts, the Supreme Court appointed by DeSantis largely, ruled for DeSantis. So you can see why, again, people are losing faith in the independence of the judiciary as an apolitical institution. I get it, but compared to the legislative branch, which just rolls over, it's still the only guardrail we have left.
Do you think that people just in routine court cases are going to start losing faith in your local circuit courts, whether it's civil or criminal? Are they going to start losing faith in how the judiciary is handling cases on the local level?
They shouldn't, because what we just discussed does not apply to trial court cases, especially in apolitical matters. It shouldn't matter who appointed the judge if you're suing someone for an insurance-related claim or something. It shouldn't matter. It should be based on the evidence and the law. But the degradation of our institutions, the attacks on our institutions have forced people to lose faith in most American institutions. I think the military may be the one last bastion of as an institution that still has the faith of a wide swath of Americans. But just about everything else, because of the constant attacks on experts and expertise in institutions, now all of a sudden, yes, people think, well, perhaps the only person they can believe is Donald Trump, right? Don't believe what you see and read, believe me. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? So I do think that has a cost, and we're going to face that for years to come, that it's not just judiciary, but all of our American institutions have been routinely criticized for being out of touch, elitist, that being an expert is somehow a bad thing. And so, yeah, that is a real problem. That's why people don't trust what they see on the news. They'll do their own research and find some quack who will tell them that COVID isn't real, and so believe then until they end up in a hospital.
So you've been a Florida Democrat for all your adult life, I think. And what happened to the Florida Democratic Party?
What happened? There's an old saying. This is not new. There's an old saying, Brian, that the Republicans who keep winning elections, they say, we're not the Harlem Globetrotters, but we're always facing the Washington Generals. That's the Republicans. They say that. And for those who don't know, Washington Generals are the team that loses every game to the Harlem Globetrotters. I think Nikki Fried's the right person for the job. She's done a good job, but it's just tough. There's gerrymandering that's gone unabated, and that's killed the Democrats. The gerrymandering has just been brutal. Even though we have fair districts in our Constitution, gerrymandering hurts us more than, I would say, any other state as far as how blatant it is and how unconstitutional it is, quite frankly, in my opinion. You also have a monetary disadvantage. Until Democrats can win a statewide race, it's going to be very hard to raise money for Democrats or make outsiders believe that there's any reason to donate to a party that doesn't seem to be able to win elections. And then you have the difference between Democrats and Republicans. There's another saying: Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Can you imagine that there would be a Republican leader in the state Senate, for example, who would want to run for governor, and because wasn't getting the support he wants, that he, in the middle or towards the end of session, during session, would then say, I'm out. Not only am I not going to be leader anymore, I'm quitting the Republican Party. It wouldn't happen, right? You couldn't have even fathom it. But that's what happened on the Democratic side. The Democratic leader in the Senate didn't like that he wasn't getting support for governor, and so he decided to leave the Democratic Party, even though the Democrats are the minority in the Senate, and he was the leader. And it was during session. So this is just the nature of being a Democrat. It's a group of individuals who think for themselves, who don't like to be told what to do. It's bottom up rather than top down, but it means you're a less organized party. It means you're less cohesive, and it means you lose a lot of elections.
So what's the political future of David Aronberg?
Well, right now I'm trying to earn an honest living in the private sector. I started my own law firm, Dave Aronberg Law. I'm also affiliated with Capital City Consulting, so I've been busy. I wrote a book called Fighting the Florida Shuffle.
Show us your book.
Oh, yes. Yes, it's on sale on Amazon and other fine bookstores.
Any camera will work.
Yes, okay, there you go. The forward written by Joe Scarborough. And this is a clarion call to action that the federal government needs to get off their butts, and they need to fix the fraud and abuse in the drug treatment industry. Here in Palm Beach County, when I was state attorney, I helped clean up the fraud and abuse in the drug treatment and sober home industries. We made 121 arrests in 5 years, but the corruption will continue unabated throughout the rest of the country, where they don't have task forces and they don't do what we did here, because federal law fuels this crisis. Federal law unwittingly incentivizes corruption in the drug treatment industry. Federal law makes it more profitable to relapse than to recover. There's no money in sobriety. The money is in relapse. It's in failure. That's got to change. And we have a prescription on how that it can be changed. It's not a hard fix at the federal level, but you got to have the political desire and knowledge to do so. If you read the book, you'll know more than 99.9% of your members of Congress. So there it is.
There's the book. I highly recommend reading it.
Thank you. And I wrote that with my co-author, Dr. Dave Campbell. It took 4.5 years, but it is just our blood and sweat is in this book, and I hope you'll check it out because we really need to be talking about this issue because too many people come down to Florida and other places to get well, and instead they leave in an ambulance and a body bag. And it's bad enough that this scandal is occurring. It's worse that the federal government is enabling it.
And I also know that you're a dog lover.
Yes. Well, I had my beloved Cookie, who I lost in 2022. I adopted her from Big Dog Ranch Rescue, and that was so devastating to lose her. And so in my grief, I went on Pet Finder because I'm all about pet adoption. And I found a dog that was listed as half Basset, because Cookie was a Basset hound, half Basset, half Beagle. Cookie was a small Basset, and this dog looked just like Cookie and was like, oh my gosh. Well, little did I know that Geddy, as I called him, I named him Geddy. Oh, see what kind of, are you a music fan who I named him after? Geddy,
No.
Geddy?
No.
Oh, well, you got to be cooler. The band Rush, the Canadian rock trio, Geddy Lee is my rock hero. So I named him after Geddy Lee. So Geddy, I didn't know that Geddy was actually 100% Beagle until I got him. And Beagles are very different than Bassets. But I love Geddy, and it's the quirks. If you have any Beagles out there, they're very vocal, and they're silly, and they're energetic, and they're always seeking food. I mean, they're just so food motivated, and I love them very much. And along with my wife's dog, Blue, the golden doodle, mini golden doodle, they're best of friends. And so, yeah, it's a real blessing. That is my passion, really, is as animal rescue. Try to make sure that every dog finds a home.
Yeah, we just rescued a dog after losing our previous rescue, so I know the...
What kind of dog?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out. She's 6.5 months old. She's a bit black lab, a bit Yorkshire Terrier, a bit pit, a bit
a mutt.
5 or 6 other things, yeah.
They know what you've done for them. These
rescues are great.
They're the best. They really are. I love to say adopt, don't shop.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us, Dave, and I'm sure you'll give us a big shout out on Morning Joe.
I was on yesterday. I love doing the show.
Yeah.
And kudos to Joe and Mika and the team for putting me on, this obscure local government official. And now I get to speak to national audiences. But I tell you, I've been on with a lot of analysts on TV. No one better than Brian Crowley.
Well,
True.
You're very, very kind. And thank you for joining us on Top of Mind Florida. We'll see you again.